So we're going to start with callback functions. So callback functions is something we've seen in the past as well. But what is a callback function? Well, a callback function is a function that is called when a certain asynchronous action is finished. Now, when is an action finished? You can either determine that yourself, as we will see in the more advanced example I will give. But one of the things you've used by now is DOM manipulation. So a button, you don't know when a button is actually clicked. So you have to prepare your code for it, and it's only going to be executed when that click is triggered. So a callback function on there, in this example, will be at the button.addEventListener. That callback function is going to be called when you click the actual button. Now in the example below, if you want to make your own script or your own function asynchronous and you don't know when it's going to be done, then you can add a second parameter called callback, and you call that parameter when you know it is done. So in code, you can manipulate the outcome by calling the callback function manually. So in this example, when a script is loaded in dynamically and the script itself triggers the load event, then we're going to call our callback function. Now don't pay any attention, like if this is too complicated, no worries, we're going to build this from scratch and then we will see how to work with these manual callback functions. Let's dive into the code. All right, so here we have a basic website just showing the button. I used Bootstrap for this, so it's a bit nicer. When we click it, something should appear in the message div. So now, of course, nothing happens, nothing in the console as well. If we look at the script, the only thing I have is the window on load. Okay, we haven't even loaded or even attached our script yet. So once we see loaded here in the console, we know that we're ready to go. So we're going to add the script itself, script.js, get a nice auto completion. The favicon is missing, but we see the loaded message. Okay, now we're ready to go. Of course, the first thing we need to do is add an event listener, which is probably the most common common asynchronous function you're going to use if we're talking DOM manipulation. So document.getElementById, which ID, it's the click me button. And we're going to add an event listener, add event listener. Now, what will the event listener need? It will need the actual event that it is listening to. So, I'm going to listen to the click event, and we're going to add our function. Now, multiple ways to do this. Now, the most common way is to actually do an inline function, which is what you will see most. You see here that I'm using arrow functions, which is the one from ES6 and onwards. So you see here, I will do a log that this button is clicked. Clicked. If I click on the button, you see that it works. So again, the clicked does not appear. If I don't do anything, this does not appear. This function is only used when I actually click the button. So you know this already, but did you know you can create your own callback function? For example, I have a file called math.js here. So math.js doesn't do anything fancy. It just has a sum function, which contains two parameters, and it will return the sum of those parameters. Now we want to add that script dynamically in the HTML file. For example, I'm grabbing that script from somewhere else and I want to add it to the HTML file. I can do that through JavaScript. So for example, I'm going to comment that out. For example, I have a load script function. I'm going to do the load script, and as you can see, it will create a script tag, create element. It will add a source to it, whatever we pass through. We're going to pass through the path to this file, and then we will append it to our head. So it's dynamically loading a script in vanilla JavaScript, nothing special, nothing fancy. Now, of course, to go further, we need to execute that script. So load script. And of course, when this is done, we're going to console log the sum of 3 and 5, for example. So sum, of course, is the function that is here in math.js. My live server immediately gives away what I was driving towards, namely that sum is not defined, which is weird because we execute the load script, of course, and which means we've imported the script file with that actual function. So why doesn't it exist? Because the time it takes to execute this script takes longer than the parser to go to the next line and actually use that sum function. So by the time we are here at line 17, sum might not be loaded correctly into the DOM yet. We have to wait until load script is done and then actually go for it. Now, how can we do that? We can create our own callback function. Now we're going to expand this load script function. We are going to use a callback. So we have to use that word, and then before we append it to the script, we are going to say that, hey, once the script is loaded, then use the callback function. We have to do that, of course, before the document is headed, because otherwise, if we add it later, then this might already have been triggered and our callback will not be called. So we prepare our callback, for example, script.onload, which asks for a function. What will we do when the load is triggered for the script tag? We will do a callback. And we can add the script as well. So now it's going to set the source. Nothing is happening in the DOM. It will add it to the DOM here. But before that, we're going to say, okay, when you add it to the DOM, I'm going to wait until it's loaded. And then I'm going to do a callback function. Now, of course, we have to adjust this. Since we are calling the callback function manually, we have to catch that here as well. So, load script. I just realized I needed to add the parameter as well. And of course, then we need to use a callback. As you can see by the auto completion, it expects a callback function, which means I can just do this. We get the script here because we're passing it along. And just like an event listener up top here, where we have one parameter and then a callback function, we have the same logic right here. So we are going to show you what is passing along. For example, script loaded. Which one? Well, we'll see. And then, of course, we need to be able to use our function. Voila. Let's see what this does. It gives me the loaded tag, of course, from the beginning. And then we see the script is loaded. It took a while, so if I'm going to refresh, you see it takes at least like a second until it loads in, and then we get the 33. So this is the basics from callback function and how you can actually make your own code more asynchronous and more dynamic by using your own callback functions.